Today's video is about Bitfocus Companion, which is an app for Windows, Linux, or Mac OS that helps manage your Stream Deck. I'll be concentrating specifically on sort of the how-tos or a couple of how-tos for Linux because, well, that's the operating system that I've got. So I haven't got Windows and Mac OS really to show some of those, but I'm hoping that the principles that I show should apply as well. And I'm going to depart a little bit. My video normally is just about an overview of whether you'd like to use something. Well, I'm going to still do that. This is the purpose of the video really, so that you can decide, is it worth using this software, installing it and using it. But I'm also going to show some specific syntax for some of what I'm doing, because it took me quite a long time to work some of that out. And I don't want to explain everything in detail, but I will put up those excerpts at the bottom of the screen where relevant, so that maybe it can assist you as well in getting some of what I've got working. So the other folks that this video really is for is also obviously things like YouTube and Twitch streamers. Gamers are going to use Stream Deck. Productivity, which I covered a bit in my previous video, and specifically in this case, musicians and producers and that sort of target group as well. Because as we'll see just now, there's a ton of connectors that work for that sort of whole industry with all the hardware and so on that they use as well. So what I want to cover really is just to start off with a quick comparison against the StreamController app. Now that is a Linux specifically app. I did a video about 2 videos back, I think, on it, just to highlight a little bit some of the differences, the very high level differences between that and this product, because that would be of interest specifically for some users, I think. And then I just want to give a sort of a high-level conceptual overview of the connectivity with Bitfocus Companion app, because this isn't just a sort of a straight install, the app comes up and you start using it. And then I will go through normal sort of navigation of the user interface and the menus. I'm going to do it together because you have to use them as sort of as an integrated whole. This isn't a question of using the application and then sort of just looking at the drop-down menus. And I will just demo some usage as well after that, just to give you a feel sort of for what some of it actually does. So we've got Bitfocus Companion down the left column and StreamController on the right column. They're both open source apps. The difference comes in with the operating system. StreamController is a Python application and it's primarily focused at Linux. So all its plugins and so on really work specifically for Linux. Bitfocus Companion is fully cross-platform, so it works with Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and you can also access it over browsers and that sort of thing as well. On the ease of use front, StreamController, very easy to use. Everything is menu-driven, toggle switches, maybe 1 or 2 things you've got to select, that sort of thing. On Bitfocus Companion, I put it down as medium because there's quite a bit of sort of variables and other things that are quite involved, especially if you want to achieve certain things. You're going to have to execute command line commands really to get some of what I'm showing you anyway to work. So I put that down as sort of more medium learning curve and also just getting going with it. And that was the purpose of my video, just to show you also just how to get going quickly, because when I started, I wasn't sure where to begin even. And then on feature-wise, StreamController is quite a newish app, and it's got 21 plugins, some very useful ones, things like OBS Studio, operating system interactions, that sort of thing. That was in my previous video. And with Bitfocus Companion, on the other hand, the app's been around for quite a while. It's got 522 different connectors to all sorts of hardware and software services. So, very, very comprehensive, but as I said, the complexity goes up a little bit. Other differences, Bitfocus Companion, you access it actually through a browser UI. So it's not an application that you start up and you're looking at the application. It's a sort of a client-server type scenario. And it's got things like triggers and variables that it makes quite a lot of use of, which is powerful stuff, but again, a little bit steeper learning curve. It also supports more than just the Stream Deck. It does the Loop Deck, the X keys, the Contour, and possibly also 1 or 2 other devices. So that's also quite interesting. I did just mention their StreamController, one of its big things also is auto page switching. So in other words, if you start up KDN Live application, if you've set it up that way, it'll automatically bring that page to the forefront. Well, I managed to get Bitfocus to do the same thing, but it is quite a workaround. I mean, it's a batch file with a couple of variables and 5 or 6 triggers, and I'll show you it works. But like I said, it wasn't as simple as it was going to be with StreamController. Then just to give a sort of a conceptual overview of how it all sort of sits together, if your Bitfocus companion is actually running on your main computer, it'll be running here as sort of as a server process with your Stream Deck attached to it. You'll obviously have your monitor window with your browser running, and that's what you're going to be mainly looking at if you want to manage your Stream Deck, that is. Obviously, the Stream Deck will show you what's on the buttons and so on. Where the big difference comes in is that because it's a client-server app actually running, you could actually use an iPad or an Android tablet or whatever and just put the IP address of the computer in with the correct port number, and you can access that and even press the buttons and use that as a secondary controller for the Stream Deck. It goes even further. Because it works that way, you can even have a laptop running with another version of StreamController running remotely, and it can connect back to this PC and control it as well remotely using the Stream Deck buttons really on the screen. And then another further interesting thing it's got is these satellite computers. So how that would work is, if this is your main computer you're working here with, doesn't even have to have a Stream Deck, but say it's got a Stream Deck, it doesn't matter. You can have up to 10 satellite computers across the network, each with their own StreamController on, with possibly, their own peripherals or hardware devices or whatever the case is. And from this primary one, you can actually manage them. It's a sort of satellite client app, they call it. I think it also doesn't run the Bitfocus companion server app on each computer. It just runs a sort of an agent, a satellite agent there. So there's a variety of ways to interact and work with it, through networks and tablets and that sort of thing. So yeah, very interesting. I think that was one of the sort of the other big differences that I found. So I think let's go on to the user interface, and I can sort of show you what it actually looks like when you start it up. Okay, I'm just going to turn the camera on here, so you can also keep an eye on the Stream Deck itself. Yes, my Stream Deck has grown a bit since the previous video, mainly because I got so excited about this, I decided to get a bigger Stream Deck. Okay, so what we just want to look at is, this is the Bitfocus, the browser view that you'd normally use to interact. And it's going to be normally your local IP address 127.0.0.1 and port 8000. That's typically how you're going to connect to this. But before you've got the browser even up, what you'll notice, if you've installed the app correctly, you'll see this little icon over here where my mouse at the moment is. If you click on that, it will actually bring up this little sort of GUI view. And in fact, I think if you right click, it should say there, Launch GUI. So if you've chosen Launch GUI, this is what you're going to see. This is where you can override what web address you can use for your browser to connect to the server app. Obviously, this starts minimized, but you could choose a different port if you wanted to and that sort of thing. And if you clicked on here, Launch GUI, it's going to start up this view for you. So, okay, I just wanted to show you there. And then you can just hide that app. If you quit, that is where, of course, you will close the server application down as well. So let's just hide that. Let's just start along the top over here, first of all. If you've obviously just connected a brand new device, you're not going to see all your buttons, and you are going to start off with a configuration wizard maybe. But typically what you'd have a look at is look at the Surfaces tab here. So another thing is Bitfocus Companion talks about surfaces because it's not just for Stream Deck. So a surface is your device basically. The main thing to worry about here is the one we're looking at the moment is the Stream Deck XL. And what you'd first want to do is, before you start anything else, you should have recognized your Stream Deck automatically, or your device. You're going to go to settings over there, and you don't have to have it as part of a group. It's just because I've got my two Stream Decks both connected, and because they both belong to the group, as I hit a button on the one, the other one changes sort of in sync with it. Or you can have them separately if you want. The horizontal and the vertical offset you see here is, if I only wanted to use, it's at the moment portion sort of top left of my Stream Deck, but if I wanted to, I could use, just say from the second column right and one row down, I could just use a subset of the buttons. That's what you'd use this for. I don't really generally worry about that. Brightness, obviously you can see it adjusting there now. I can actually just turn it so it's a bit more readable. And then you can also rotate the buttons. This is if your Stream Deck is rotated on its side or upside down or whatever the case is. So you've got that setting, and that's just your pin lock for security. And while we're there, we can just have a look at the settings. That's just the basic settings for the Stream Deck. Under settings here, this is actually quite important because you'll see here max column and max row. This Stream Deck I'm using at the moment has actually got 8 buttons wide. And remember, that's going to be from minimum being 0 up to 7. That's 8 buttons wide. And rows is also going to be from minimum to maximum 3, which is 4 rows. I just want to warn you one thing here. It starts off with an unlimited number of buttons almost. And if you've already set buttons up and you go and change this down to 5, for example, it's going to strip out those buttons you've set and you will never see them again. I'll show you a bit later where you can save your configs as well and sort of get it back. But I'm just saying, be wary of that. I did a lot of sort of design work, and then I went and edited and played around with things. I was playing around with this max and minimum things, and I chopped my buttons off. So just bear that in mind. So that's just quite a key thing. That is just so that when you look at the buttons view over here just now, that is what you see. You're not going to see a whole lot of blanks all the way around the outside there. So yeah, there's a couple of, I just want to see if there's anything else of importance really. Mostly it's the timeouts and the locking while you know, if the computer's locked. That's your satellite apps if you wanted to connect to those computers. This is where you can set up things like the TCP listener for the server, the UDP or HTTP or whatever the case is. And if we look down here somewhere, you should see where it's set up for the server. Oh, there we go, HTTPS server. So that port 8443, if I use my iPad or Android tablet or whatever to go to my PC's IP address and I put port 8443 in, I'll be able to access all these buttons from there. So that's where you set that up. It's a little bit finicky around that, but oh, that's actually disabled at the moment. I think I've got something else active. I can't remember what it is, but anyway, that is the HTTPS server. So we'll see which of these I've actually got active. No, doesn't look like I've got it active, but anyway, I have got it access. It is accessible at the moment for remote access. Now, I can't remember exactly where it was, but anyway, that's those settings. If you go here to import export, that is where you will export, and you can choose if it's just 1 or 2 or everything, and if it's in compressed format. You just download and you save it, and you can import again if you need to, if you've messed something up. So you know that's going to be your friend as well. Before we get onto the buttons themselves and so on, what I want to show you is the connectors. So these are the 522 connectors I talked about. These are all things that I've added. So none of this functionality was here. I just had some very, very basic functionality to start with. So you can search obviously on the right here by searching, say, for OBS and, you know, seeing what there is, or YouTube. I'll do a quick rundown there so you can just get an idea of what is actually here, and you know, just please speed past this. A lot of these you'll recognize. I think these means they're not compatible with this version, but basically you're going to go down here and you'll see tons and tons of different hardware devices, specifically I've noticed for music and production work, cameras and cameras, that sort of thing, Cisco, Denon. It just gives a good idea of what are all the things you could possibly integrate with. And if you've got any of these devices, well, have lots of fun. These generic ones, I am using things like, I'll show you just now, but things like the button blinker, the file reader, HTTP requests I'm using, MQTT, SMTP, ping, SSH. So there's a whole stopwatch. Those are sort of generic things. And also, I think it was OSC. Some of these are also to send commands to the operating system. Time zone. There's some Google stuff there as well. HD TVs. Try and get through this fairly fast. I'm not going to stop on each one really. I think their website, there is a link to all the latest connectors. There's a Raspberry Pi, for example, as well. It can do things with the Raspberry Pi. Roland, a lot of Roland stuff. Samsung displays. But it should give an idea of, oh, I think I saw Telegram bot as well there, so you can hit buttons to sort of execute TP-Link, which should be, well, networking equipment. Video LAN, VLC, Yamaha, and so on, and Zoom. So these are the ones that I've already added. Typically, if there's one here that you're interested in, you just click on Add. And this is quite an important screen, so I just want to talk about this quickly. These are some of the modules that I have got activated. So specifically, OBS Studio, HomeAssistant server, which helps me sort of do all sorts of things and have a dashboard on my Stream Deck really for the HomeAssistant server, time zone, and so on. But if you want to know, for example, on say a HomeAssistant server, what you can do with it. Oh, sure, firstly, I should just say the status here means it's green and connected. Typically, when OBS Studio is not running on my desktop PC, this is also going to show an error. It can't connect, like you'll see at the bottom here for VLC. But everything else is active. I've just disabled the speed test. Any of these connectors here that need configuration, like for example, the OBS Studio, once you've added it here, you also need to configure it. And if you click on it, you'll see there is the configuration. So in this case, this would be the stuff that I've had set up. That port, you set this up in OBS Studio itself, of course, the server port and all that sort of thing. And you set whatever your password is going to be. And in essence, you just put the same information in here. And if OBS Studio is up and running, then it should, of course, connect and so on. You'll just say save over there. HomeAssistant. It's a similar thing. HomeAssistant, you'll put your URL with the port number it's on and give it any label or name there that you want to. And you'll put your access token. You've got to go create that access token or the API token inside your HomeAssistant. Some of the others, there isn't really configuration. Time zone, well, you do set your home time zone there and you can give it a label. Some of these others have just got some defaults. But just remember that when you've added a connection, you also need to just go and see if there's any relevant something that's got to be set up. So even the ping connector, for example, you do tell it what host do you want to go ping on the internet, or maybe you want to do it as something inside your house. You want to ping the I don't know, the HomeAssistant server or whatever the case is, and you can set your timeout here and all that sort of thing. So yeah, and where you want to run your speed test and so on. Here, if you click on this little question mark for help, it's going to give you a whole lot of information about the connector, what sources it will work with, in other words, OBS Studio, what switching and transitions it will do, recording, outputs, general, available feedback, sources, and then very importantly is the variables, because you have to use the variables to decide what you want to display. So there's that. And the other thing you will actually pick up is, so it'll be the same, say, for HomeAssistant, all the various things you can do with it. But what's also of interest is this little S here, which stands for the variables. If you click on that, it's going to show you exactly what the current variables are and even what the existing values are. So you could use this then, if you click over here to copy, it'll copy this variable name over here, and you can use it then inside the button or in the triggers or whatever the case is. So yeah, just that is all the stuff it's reading from my HomeAssistant. So quite a lot of stuff there. Also, you've got logs over here, so you can click as well to go and see if there was anything, any errors or anything else you need to debug with that particular connector. So just bearing in mind then also that this one for VLC, for example, you will see if I start up VLC, let's just see if I can get it here on this. There's my VLC media player. You should see over there, it'll come up, goes green now because, oh, there's VLC, sorry. There is VLC. We'll use that just now as well. So I'll just leave that down there and connected. Again, if you want to see what you can do with VLC, click there on variables, and that gives you an idea of all the variables you can sort of play with and do things with. So let's look at buttons then, because the connectivity is now giving you a whole bunch of sort of presets or variables you can work with. typically when you start, all your buttons are just going to show these numbers over here. So you can see if you go down row 0, 1, 2, 3, there's row 3 and it's column 0. So that will be the button. Your button's going to look like this. This is going to be an empty button. And to get going with this, there's sort of two things, there's probably three things I think you can do, but the two main ones that I use is, first of all, you're just going to say, well, you can say create a button from scratch. The other one is you can take presets. Certain of these connectors have already got presets. So if I said, for example, maybe say OBS Studio even, I click over there, you could say now, what sort of variable or preset, sorry, are you looking to make use of? Well, I want something relating to recording. And then it says, well, I've got two buttons set up that you can use for recording. And now what you do is you just take the button and you drag it down there, and you can see that is my recording button because I am recording at the moment. I've been going for 23 minutes. That will be using what they call presets. So that's one way of creating a button. And if you click on that button now, there's a whole bunch of things you can edit relating to this button as well. This that you're seeing at the top, the button text string, is always the code that is going to be used to display that you see there actually in the button itself. Or if the buttons hasn't got that button on at the moment. I should probably, let's just carry on this one at the moment. You'll see there's the word recording, and the \n is to indicate a new line. That's how you tell it to move the text down to the new line. And the next part is a variable. The $obs recording is a variable, and that is recording. If I was to stop recording, this would probably say stopped. So it's updating that variable, whatever the text is, for the process over there. And then there was another new line and the OBS recording time code. So it's making use of two variables. It's plugged this in for you automatically because you took the preset. But you could have just as well said create a button, and you could put this all in yourself, making use of the correct variables. And we can maybe just have a look. If I say here now delete the button, if I was to say create a button, you could say, I could just type in there recording \n more \n, and I could use a variable here, and I could go just up here on the right tab to say variable, and I could choose a variable for anything over here. I could say whatever this variable is. I don't even know what it is. I'm going to say copy. I'll go back to edit the button, and I'm just going to paste in that variable, and you'll see there it's put that value in, which was a 0. The text is a bit big, so it's got an auto font size, which doesn't seem to always work right when variables stretch it. So you could say make that 18, or you could make it 14. You can change the text color at the moment. Oh, sorry, it's actually white. Sorry, my screen is on dark mode at the moment, but you could change it to say, red text, and you could make the background bright green if you wanted to. Yeah, these are a couple of just alignment options. I don't want to go through it in very much detail, but just to say then also that you've got sort of two actions here. You've got a press action, which would be any one of these various functions and variables that can be executed when you press the button. And you've got a release action. So normally you might not use the release action. Sometimes, certain applications or devices you're controlling, you want to have a release as well. So this duration group is actually giving you still your quick press button, but you can also have short release actions and long release after you've been holding for longer than a second. And of course you can adjust that for longer if you want to, whether execute while you're still holding. There's a variety of different ways you can sort of set this up, and I'll show you how I've applied some of it just now. But what I wanted to say was just remember that something that confuses people is that if you've got a couple of steps, because you can add, additional steps if you want to as well for more and more actions here, that if I was to add a step there, you'll see it's got a delay. So this by default is going to execute immediately you press the button, whatever that action is that you've chosen there. And you can see it's active at the moment. You can deactivate that action. But you can add additional actions to happen as well, which could be, say, that. And you'll see now both of these have got a delay of 0, which means when you press the button, by default, all these delays will be triggered from the time you press the button. This one's going to trigger immediately. This one's going to trigger 300 milliseconds later, and it's all relates to the button press time. And if you've got 4 or 5 or 6 of these actions, then you need to stagger them all with increasingly more time. Remember, measuring from the time of the button press. If you click relative delays, it will be relative to when the previous action triggered. So that's obviously going to be at 0. This one will be 300 milliseconds after that one. And if you had another 300 millisecond one here, it would be 300 after this one triggered. In other words, 600 milliseconds from the time the button was pressed. So it's just something to sort of get used to there, really. And yeah, I think these will make more sense if I just show you sort of really how I've used them. The other important concepts I just want to talk about quickly is feedbacks. So what happens with a feedback is you can add a feedback here, and essentially this is going to be something that will update back to the text after you've actually sort of pressed the button. So it'll be a feedback action, and this can often be using some variable that was generated or that was queried from somewhere else, and it can sort of update your button. But like I said, it'll make more sense, I think, if I actually show how I've been using some of the buttons. And steps would be similar to the other applications. I think it was stages or something it was called. In essence, a step means the first button press executes whatever the actions are for step 1. The second button press would toggle across to execute everything in actions that are under step 2. And if you pressed again, it would execute step 1's actions. And it basically carries on like that. If you had 5 steps, it would sort of progressively go through all of them. So that's really what steps are. And that's a sort of the very basic essence of sort of how the button works. You can see obviously up here what the button looks like. You can test your button as well. And you can check over here under logs to go and have a look and see, you know, if there were any errors or things didn't work out the way you expected it to. So that really was sort of an overview of what some of the various things on the buttons do. I think let's just go and have a look at some of those buttons, and then it'll maybe make a bit of sense. I'm going to go off the OBS screen. I'll come back to this one just now, just so we've got the same layout over here. So in essence, this is a fairly simple button. All this button is actually doing is it's opening the OBS page up. So if I go back again over there, you'll see on this button, if you look down here at what happens with press action, well, it says here, first of all, on which surface is it going to work, because I've got more than one, but usually it's just going to be the current surface. And I don't need to use any variables for this, but what do I wanted to do? I wanted to change page, and you can select whichever page you've got over here. And it's very similar to how StreamController worked as well. This is the manual, press the button and change the page to something else. And I think that's all I've really got there. If you go to the other one, which is this page, and I'll just have to change this manually. This doesn't work the same as the other one. This return button that I've got up the top over here, you'll see it's a similar type of action, current surface, but it just returns me to which page. I want to go back to the main page. That's really all that is actually doing. So the auto page setup, I can show you sort of how I had to do this now. I created a button called Test Apps Open, and let me just show you how it works really at the moment. I think I don't have KDN Live open at the moment. So if I press this, you'll see a little green thing over there. It was just saying it's executed, but nothing's happened. It's just stayed where it was. It stayed black. If I now open up KDN Live, it's one of the applications. I've got it checking for about 3 applications at the moment. If it finds one of the applications open, it's going to switch the page automatically. So you will need to watch the insert there with the Stream Deck. Okay, so there's KDN Live is open. So if I now go and press this button, just watch here on the camera though to see what actually happens. I'll press the button, it executes, and it immediately switches the page, the physical Stream Deck's page, to my KDN Live page. So that actually does work. It's, like I said, a bit of a workaround, and I will just show you quickly how I did it. If you go to the button, obviously that's just the title, so test apps open. I've got size, auto, etc. What I'm really doing here at the moment is I'm firing off as actions internal system run shell path local. That is where it executes something on the command line. And I actually use this a lot. And you'll see I've got some delays staggered here. So it starts off running a batch file, and I'll put that on the screen here. This is a batch file that tests whether KDN Live is actually open at the moment. And I'm just using plain Linux commands, and it's going to return a true or a false. So it runs that, and under target variable, I've said to it, put whatever the true or false is, put it into, and I've created here an internal variable called custom variable called KDN Live open. In other words, is it open, true, or is it open, false, not open? And if you want to know where to create custom variables, you're going to go there to variables, custom, and these are the existing ones, of course, but you can also add a new one at the bottom there with a name. And you'll see they're just plain simple little variables with that name, custom KDN Live open. It starts off by default normally as true. Well, it's starting as true. I don't know why. It's probably because it was open. And its current value, after I've pressed the button, that's the current value, true or false. So it's set after that batch file is run. I'm running the same thing to test if Zoom is open, true or false. Snowrunner, true or false. War Thunder, true or false. Open BVE, the simulator game, true or false. So it checks each of these, and you'll see I've got relative delays. So it runs the first batch file, then it starts the second one 200 milliseconds later, then it runs the next one 200 milliseconds, next one, and so on. So it runs a couple of these. So each of these variables has now got a true, false, true, false. Hopefully only one of them is true, basically. Then what I've got is, after it's got all that set, it now has got a thing called, it's an internal trigger to enable or disable a trigger that I've set up. So in other words, if KDN Live open page, in other words, if KDN Live is open or that variable is true, then enable this trigger. And I'm not going to go through all of these now, but basically that's what it does. It just enables the trigger for that next action, really. And if I go look at triggers here, you'll see, let's follow the if KDN Live open page one. If that thing was open, it is now set this trigger to enabled. And what it's then going to do is, I've just set a little description over there saying it's only going to change the page if that flag is set to true. So now that this is active, it's going to run for about 2 seconds, and it'll just go and check if that variable equals true, and it's that variable that we set a little bit earlier on. If that's true, then the action is going to be surface, change page to number 4, KDN Live. Obviously, if it was false, this trigger would go active, but it wouldn't do anything because it's going to be if false, then there's no action, so it won't actually do anything. And what I do after that is I've set the page, and immediately after that, just after that, I've got a slight delay, and I just set that flag back to false again. Otherwise, you don't want them all being true. Everything's going to keep tripping. But the other workaround I did is, so this is all fine, but you've got to keep also resetting these triggers. So I've got one trigger here that, and this runs all the time. It basically, every 10 seconds or so, it is setting these triggers back to disabled. Because otherwise they're going to stay enabled. Actually, I'm going to see if I can't disable the trigger at the end of the trigger itself. I'm not sure. I didn't look at that. I just thought of it now. But basically, check every 10 seconds if pages are open and triggers are still enabled. So what is it actually doing here? It's just checking then if KDN Live trigger is enabled, then disable it. So if it is enabled, no. And that sets it. And it just does that now for each one of those triggers. Bit messy, but it actually works. It's not the ideal, to be honest. That is where StreamController does do it a lot better. And this, by the way, also breaks on the Wayland desktop. It works perfectly nicely with X11, and it's mainly because I can use ydotool, and ydotool has got the capability to check if windows are open and to push keystrokes to a specific window. ydotool cannot do that. So ydotool will work for things like global hotkeys and key presses and so on in Wayland. But this is where now the test apps open also fails, because it's very difficult to determine if windows are open with ydotool. I did find some way, but it was not working 100%. So, okay, that is that one. This was just a button. Most of these buttons are just to change pages, really. I can just show this one is quite interesting. It shows you the time. So it's an internal time function. And in essence, if I press it, you'll see it's got a short delay. It shows you the date and time, and it goes back to the time. So if I press the button, the action here is, remember, it's already defaulting to show you the time as it is. If you look here, time zone, time 24 hours. And if you want to change these variables, again, under variables, you can select seconds and whatever else you want to have in there. That will be updating on your button the whole time. If you press the button, instantly, it's going to change it to time zone date. And what target? Well, this button. On release, 2 seconds after I've released it, it's going to set it back to time zone 24 hour. So if I was to hold this button for 5 seconds, you'd see the date appear. And only when I've released it, another 2 seconds later, will it then go back to the time. So it would be 7 seconds later then. But that's basically that is sort of how you time, sort of things on release as well. Then the ping true is actually using the ping functionality. So it is one of the variables from that ping connector, ping live. And what I've got here of interest really is, you'll see it's got a green background. I don't press anything here really. There is no press actions here. Everything is in the feedbacks. Default, it's going to show you ping alive, and that's going to either show then true, or it's going to show false here if it can't ping the external site. This is basically an indicator for me to show if the internet is up or down. So if you look under feedbacks here, there isn't a live state. It's one of the variables again for the ping connector. So in other words, if a live state, in other words, equals true, then do the background green with black printing. And here what I've done is I haven't just set the background. I've actually also called, there's a connector you might have seen there called Blink. So you'll see here, that is the name of it. It's a generic connector called Blink. Blink when the variable value changes. And what I've said here is check this variable value, ping alive. In other words, it should be true most of the time. And if it is not equal to, that's the operator for not equal to true. In other words, it's false, it's lost the ping. Then change the background color to red, and it'll blink it as well. So that is really how I get, whoa, what did I just click here? Actually, I just think we might have had a small internet problem. But anyway, that's now you can actually see sort of what happens in real time. Unless I just clicked on something, but I think that ping might have just been lost. It'll probably reset just now because it checks every 30 seconds or a minute or so, so it'll probably come back. This is a preset for the weather connector. It basically sort of drops this in, but you can edit the variables over here if you want to. This one I set up manually using my HomeAssistant variables. So I pulled out the value of HomeAssistant server entity sensor, that's my weather station's name, wind kilometer an hour value. And I put that in over here just to see how it would work and how it would format and how it compares to the weather connector. So just to show you, that's how you can actually use it to display something all the time. And then I put a kilometer per hour with a space in, and I used the variable for the wind direction there as well. Most of these others are as before. This was my signature, but I think if you look here, I have set this up for ydotool so that it works also on Wayland. The one big thing with ydotool, and I think I spoke about it in the last video, is that it's a little bit more complicated because you don't put in the Alt or the Control or the S that's being pressed. You've got to put the key codes in and then release them in the reverse order. But in essence, that is how you would just send this command to the command line. It gives out that text. You know, so whatever window you're in, like if I'm in an email or whatever the case is, I'll just press this button and it's going to insert my whatever signature or whatever you want to put in there, really. Similar thing with updates. It's also running that run shell command action. And in this case, I'm running a command here for the updates. I should just say there is one snag that you're going to pick up with running something like updates. Whatever you execute under Bitfocus Companion, it times out after about 30 seconds and it closes that process. So it's fine just to execute short things like a signature thing and it's done and it's finished in less than a second. But when I ran updates, and an update may run for 1 minute or 3 or 4 minutes, what I found is it would start it, it would just start the update and it would just close the shell window and it's gone. So I had to do a workaround, and that's why this is actually very important. If you want to run or start up any application that needs to continue running, you need to do a sort of a double console. You need to start up 2 terminal sessions. So you would this is just specific, of course, to Bitfocus Companion. And this took me a while to sort out. You run bash C, that starts up the first terminal, and inside that terminal it then executes, in my case, kconsole, because I'm using KDE, and it actually runs this command inside it with that symbol there, so that it runs in the background. In essence, it starts up that first terminal, which starts up the second terminal. So although the first terminal gets killed, this second one, and with that run in the background, that will actually keep the second window running for your update. So this timeout, unfortunately, just cannot be made long enough to be of any use over here. So that's very important, like I said, if you want to run applications for a bit longer. And these are the ones I've sort of shown also before. I've done the same way that I run those double terminal sessions, but I'm basically just running my Obsidian Notes and then immediately opening up my, in this case, my tips that I update fairly regularly. And this is the one for the Elgato Stream Deck one that I run. Yeah, this one I can just quickly show. This is an interesting one. It also runs a command shell. What this is really doing is it's opening a browser window with the dashboard icons, because I use these quite a bit when I'm setting up dashboards and things like that. So if I was to click this, xtd-open is the command in Linux that opens the associated application with whatever you're trying to do. So if it is like an HTTPS link, it's going to open your browser basically. So if I was to do now to press this button, let's just press it, you'll see it'll open a new tab and it opens up that reference page for me that I use quite often with all the different icons in it. So yeah, that's sort of what these just do a different one. And that was another weather station thing I was testing. This is quite interesting. It's just the YouTube. Oh, no, sorry. It's not the YouTube connector. I'm actually using HomeAssistant. Sorry. I've got inside Home. So also, if you find things can't be done with inside Bitfocus Companion, a sort of a workaround I found sometimes is if you can query or if you can change an entity inside your HomeAssistant, you can query other devices and sometimes change their behavior as well. In this case, it's just testing my YouTube subscribers. So what this does is it updates on my dashboard any day, or my Stream Deck every day. I can just see sort of what my subscriber number is at the moment. And as they, as the more subscribers come in, the number goes up. It's just for use. Let's just have a look at OBS Studio, because there's some quite interesting things over here. So this is why, by the way, I bought the bigger Stream Deck, because although I could use that press button to change the page, or like I was doing with Snowrunner, I had a button on the bottom right that changed to the next relevant page for the crane. OBS Studio, I needed all these buttons really together. It's very difficult to do this if you've got to keep switching between 2 different pages. So that was the reason I upgraded the Stream Deck. But in essence, these buttons are using that OBS connector to get their functionality. So a lot of these, you just drag and drop them on here. Some of them are manual, like the restarting the Pipewire audio. But a couple of these, things like headset mic. Let me just have a look here. There's a variable. So basically, this is checking to see if my headset mic is enabled or not. I've got it to change based on a variable. So because it's a variable, if that value changes, it's going to update and change the text display on the screen. At the moment, it's green. You'll see here, I've got here if, and this will be a true value, if audio is muted, it's going to show me a red there. It's going to change that to red. And that's important because if I'm recording, I don't always know what's on and what's off. So that button will immediately go red, and I know there's a problem. I know a lot of people go for red for recording and green for off. In my case, well, like these buttons over here, I prefer it sort of green, really. This is an interesting one, the mic sound level. I've got everything on one button, basically. So the text is going to stay the same. It'll say mic sound level, but it's using feedbacks. So really, it's got the audio meter function in that OBS connector for the Corsair headset mic. And if it's peaking, it's going to go into red. So if I was to talk quite loudly, you'll see it changes into red. And that's supposed to be an indication that I'm actually peaking too much. And I can also set the level for the peaking if it goes above -40, for example. So that was also something else that I just set up, which is quite handy while I'm recording, to sort of in one button see what's going on there. Also, if it's too quiet, and I'm just trying to think where I set this up, it might be one of these other ones over here, but in essence is this one, the -40. So one of these, I had set it up somewhere as well, that if it is too soft and there's absolute, and it's off or no sound, I think it goes black. Yep. So if I stop talking, you see it changes to black. And if I'm talking, it's green. Then I know this thing is working properly. So there again, that was something else I set up. The camera just tells me that the webcam is on, and you can see if I press this, the webcam is going to go off. Well, and it goes red. Well, you have to see that on the screen, obviously, over there. But that again just tells me if the camera is on or off. And the text is there, but the actions are going to be in the current scene, source webcam, and toggle, visible on or off, basically. And the feedback is basically in sync with that, really, that if you'll see it defaults to red. So in other words, it just says here, if that source name camera is true, then it'll show green. If it isn't, then it's just going to default back to red again. So you know, there's different ways you can set that up, really. My logo is the same way over there. I can turn it off and on, and you'll see it goes red, and then it goes green when it's back on again. These are quite interesting. These are key presses, basically. And I've said hold there because I'm not going to remember always that I've got to hold. So if I hold that, you'll see I can now draw on the screen while I'm holding. If I let go, it stops drawing. And if I press this button, it clears it over there. So that is for my mouse draw. And all I'm really doing is, you could use ydotool for this as well. But while I'm pressed, it's going to be executing. Don't ask me what the shortcut is. Maybe it's Alt-M. I can't remember. But if you hold Alt-M the whole time, it will be drawing on the screen. And if you release, I think it was a key press. If you release it, it executes this, which should be the release action. Why I have to do it this way is ydotool can stay in a pressed state, and you can then execute a release state to let go as well. So that's just the release action codes to release the shortcut for the mouse drawing. This was, again, just a key press. This just alternates you can see my button presses there. Oops, if I press it now, there's no button press. If I press it again, there the button presses back again. These were just things to show the state of whether I have activated things like I've got things like this phone thing I can turn on that I use for if I want to show a mobile screen or something. Obviously, I'll have something filled in inside of the phone there, but you can see the phone button goes green then. Or if I've disabled it, again, there the button goes blue. And similarly for slideshow or titles I put up or anything. Some of these are also just presets you drop on here for your CPU, that sort of thing. Computer speakers, if I want to activate the speakers for a game that I want to record and show back in a video, then that would be computer speakers on, and you'd hear now any dinging or notifications or whatever the case is. This is for my zoom, and I could zoom in over there, but what you'll notice as well is the button color changes to show me that it's zoomed in, and you'll see the full screen has gone red to indicate to me, hey, you're in a zoomed in mode at the moment. If I go back to full screen, it goes back to green, and this is all just done through, again, the feedback buttons. It's executing an OBS set a program scene. I've got a couple there. It's executing for full screen. And the feedback is going to be, if the scene is full screen, have green. If it's not, in other words, here you can see I'm using the invert tick. If full scene is not, then make it red. So that's how I change the status, and I've done exactly the same for these buttons. These are also just scenes, basically. So yeah, that is sort of how I got most of what I'm doing working. This is also just a key press to execute a global press that follows the mouse around. I didn't change the color status, and I should probably have done that as well. But anyway, that's basically it. So if I go back, is just the media stuff, because there's something I want to show you here. Remember I said I've got VLC active at the moment. There's VLC running at the moment, okay? If you look over here at the VLC stuff, this is using the connector. So the status changes if I'm playing a video or music or something in VLC, and it'll give you the timer changing here and everything as well, and you'll see it's green. But if I close VLC, you'll see the buttons will show you something interesting. Should show you something interesting. No, it's not showing you something interesting, but okay. OBS Studio also does this with its connector. It shows you a little green dot, or red dot, sorry, in the top right corners, which means that that connector has lost it's not going to work. It's lost its connection. So just as a matter of interest. So if you see your OBS Studio's got little red lights in the top right corner, it means the connector is not connected. The moment you start OBS Studio up and it's made its connection in the background, your buttons will all be active. I won't go through all of these now. They're just pure ydotool key shortcuts that execute muting, volume, you know, all that sort of thing. That's just my media controls that I'd set up. There's nothing of interest really to see there. I just want to check. Okay, so here's something of interest. Let me just go to Snowrunner. So Snowrunner, the game, this is where I was experimenting with ydotool. Can, as I said, remember, push a key press to a specific window that's open. So I've got things like search for if there's a window open called Snowrunner, then activate it in the foreground and sync it and send the key E, the global shortcut key E, because the key E triggers all-wheel drive. So most of these are just shortcut keys like that. And obviously if you're on X11 and not Wayland, it's going to bring it into focus and push the key press. But what was of real interest to me was the crane here. So normally what happens is you press the key V over here to bring up the function menu in the game. Then you press C, because you can only execute the crane stuff if the function menu is open. So I've said to it, open the function menu, wait about 200 milliseconds, then press C for crane. And then there's a couple of other actions that actually sort of goes through to put the anchor out and all the rest of it. And I've just added delays to each of these, and I've automated the whole process here. And the last step is also then to switch the page on my Stream Deck across to the crane page. So I haven't got the game open now, but you'll see what I mean. When I press the button, it's going to hit CE whatever, and it also opens the crane page up all ready to sort of use over here. And I did a similar thing. Okay, now I can't see it here, but these again are just key presses. But what's of interest here, I just want to show as well, is there's something different here, and I've mentioned it before, the key down. Crane type controls are, you hold the button in and it carries on doing something. On StreamController, I think there's just a tick button you click, which says hold key, I think, while you're pressing the button. We don't have that option in Bitfocus Companion. So what I then did is I found on ydotool, there is something called key down and key up. So if you press this button and you hold it, it's going to be doing this continuous S, as if you're holding S on the keyboard the whole time. And when you release it, it must execute the key up. If it doesn't, that S is going to carry on being pressed the whole time. So under release actions, I've put something here, ydotool key up. When I let go, it will also release the S key at the same time. So that basically is the same for all of these different buttons here. The only other thing of interest I wanted to show again is, and it's pretty well much the reverse of what I did before. It took a while to get this delays properly synchronized, but when I go back to the Snowrunner game out of Crane, there's a whole bunch of actions that actually have to happen. So one of them is here pressing the insert key. I think that was to lift the anchors, if I remember correctly. Then there's a whole couple of other things I do here. Press the down key, wait 0.1 of a second, press the down key again, press it again, press it again, press it again. That was actually to navigate down on that function menu. And I had to I could only queue so many in the Xduke tool, so I had to put another one there. And then another one. Then hit enter, wait a little bit, press the escape key, and then change the page back also to the Snowrunner page. So really what that was then doing was lifting the anchor, bringing that menu up, going down a couple of steps, hitting enter to close it and everything. And yeah, as I said, that was just a whole bunch of queued up actions that needed to be triggered. So it is possible to do that as well, no problem. Okay, I think that is sort of those functions I wanted to talk about. War Thunder driving. No, I didn't want to do War Thunder. I just want to show one other function which is quite important. I'm using this in War Thunder, the game. Now, various games have got this thing. When you are knocked out of action, in this case your tank, but it could be, doesn't matter what it is, where you have to hold a button the whole time to keep repairing, it's very difficult to hold that button down while you're also hitting other buttons on your keyboard to go forward or back or turn your turret to carry on shooting and so on. So what I was looking for was, give me a function where I can hit the button once and it will hold the button down. I can get on with other things and it'll keep holding it to do the repair, but I can get on with re-aiming the gun and shooting back and doing whatever else I can possibly still do while I'm waiting for the repair. And then I hit the button again, or I do a long press and it'll cancel the repair. So I've got these set up just shortcut keys for like the fire extinguisher, the engine smoke and that sort of thing. But you'll see this one I've said they're long and then cancel underneath. And let's just have a look what happens here. If I press this button, it's going to execute the key down F, which means it's going to hold the F down the whole time. And it's set a value, I see a variable, which is called repairing. It's just a trigger that it toggles to say, okay, it is repairing. It's set that value to true so that I can test against that. Right, so now I've pressed it and I've let it go and it's now holding the keyboard button F down the whole time. Short release won't do anything. But if I then hold it for a bit longer and then I release, half a second or longer, and then I release it, it'll execute the Xduke tool key up F. In other words, it will release the F key and it'll stop repairing. And then it'll set that variable back to false. And I think the reason is because if you go look under feedback, you'll probably see I've changed the color or something. Yes, I have. There we go. If the internal custom repairing variable is equal to true, then set the background color to green. So I would, let me just have a look. I can show you sort of what this looks like. If I start up a terminal session here, let's just make it fairly small. I'll click over there. Now I'm going to press the repair button. Oh, I just need to get it on my... If I press this repair button once, you'll probably see the key F appearing inside here all the time until I long press it again. There we go. And if I now long press it, oh, and it was flashing green, eh? If I now long press it and release, there it stopped because it lifted the key now and it's gone back to its normal color. So I changed that. So that was quite a nifty way I thought of doing it. You know, if you've got to hit the key, hold that button down, it flashes green to remind you you've still got to release it. And yeah, that's one way of holding it while you're busy with other things. Yeah, so that was the function maybe that could be of use to some people as well. The only other thing I really want to still show is the HomeAssistant stuff. So there is a couple of things that happen here. I'm monitoring a whole bunch of things at the moment. This was just to irritate my wife. If I press this button, it does the announcement over the speakers to say it's just started raining. Normally that does it when the weather station picks up that it is raining. But I'm monitoring things like the gate battery, my solar system battery, my solar system's time to empty battery, completely empty. I am monitoring things like, very important, when it got a last 100% full charge on the solar system, because if it hasn't done that for 7 days, then I need to manually give it a full charge. Otherwise, the battery gets out of balance. So this is a thing that it monitors within the Home Assistant, and I'm just reading a variable from Home Assistant there. You can see entity sensor last full days, and that's the 3 it's putting in there at the moment. When it gets to 7, I think there's a trigger actually that by default this actually is green, but there is a trigger that I've got set up here, battery last charged. Basically, it checks this every now and again, and if the variable has now changed to more than 7, in other words, it's now become 8 days, then it will immediately bring to the fore that this Home Assistant page that you're seeing here at the moment. It brings that up on the Stream Deck no matter what I'm busy doing at the moment. You'll see it goes to Home Assistant. And the reason why is because this button will then, well, not only will it say last charge full 8 days, it should also show it in red. Oh, there we go. Blink red when battery not fully charged for 7 days. So it checks that variable that I've already spoken about, last day is full. If it's greater than 6, in other words 7 days, then the background changes to a flashing red. So I've got a whole bunch of these type of notifications set up. If the gate battery falls below 85%, because it's connected to power actually, flash red. If the WAN for the internet is off, flash red. And it'll all immediately come to this page to alert me. What have we got? AC load. If this goes over 5 kilowatts of power, it also changes to this page. This starts flashing red as well to show me the power consumption. So I've done essentially the same sort of thing there really. And obviously the variable that you're seeing over here is always this value that keeps updating here the whole time from the Home Assistant system. I'm also monitoring things like my router temperature, my router's RAM level. I'm also monitoring things like my Open Media Vault server's CPU usage, its RAM usage, and its temperature as well. And all these things are pulling through from Home Assistant. You can see over there. So yeah. The other thing I just wanted to show is that I am using, for the solar here, I am using the Home Assistant plugin or connector, and I'm just pulling that value in over there. But just to show you, and I did show this also in StreamController, their syntax is a little bit different, but it, again, one of these things that took me a long time to figure out how to do it under Bitfocus Companion. So I'd like to show this, and I will put it also on the screen here for you, is I've got a press button here. This is not live updating. You'll see it's got a internal custom go get state of charge percentage. What's actually happening is when I press the button, this is the press action, it's executing this URL that you can see over here, and you can just change whatever sensor.battery under state of charge over here. You can change this to any other entity if you want to get that state back. The important part is this header input, the JSON, the formatting of this, because you've got to have exactly this header sent to get the value back. This is the authorization and the API's key, essentially, to that my Home Assistant will respond. If you don't have this key, it won't respond. If you've got it, you can also do this. So I don't want to show the whole key, but I'll show the format of it on the screen for you. And then the response comes back into this custom variable called get state of charge. And when it returns the value from this get header, the HTTP get command over there, it updates that variable with, and this is the problem, it extracts this JSON code. It's got to extract the value out to give us this 56 over here. And this here is looking at the JSON code that came back, and it's going to check the variable called state, or something that starts with state. It's a specific array actually with the name state. It then will pull back the value and put that into this variable. And you'll see here, that's what I'm displaying. This custom get SOC percentage. It's that variable value that it returns. So if I press this, Oh, actually it is already on 56. Might have done this when we changed pages actually, but in essence, a pity now this is not on 55. Oh, we didn't change pages. Hang on. Sorry, I didn't change the page over here. But if I press this button, it's going to execute that basically and pull back the 56 value and display it. So I'll put this, as I said, on the screen because it might help a couple of you trying to figure out how to query values using HTTP. The reason you'd want to use this maybe is if the connector doesn't have that functionality or it can't do something, then you could maybe use this as a fallback actually. The only other two interesting things really are probably this little timer button, just for interest. It's one of the presets and an existing connector. All I've really set this up to do at the moment is if I press the button, it starts the timer and it says it's true. And that's just the display stuff at the moment that it does there. The press actions, oh, it's just a toggle for the stopwatch. It's a preset, so there's nothing really that I put in there. But in essence, it does that. If you quick press, it pauses. And if you long press, it will clear, I think. There we go, and it resets it. So you'll see there I did the long press after a second, do the stopwatch reset, and that's what it does. Short press will toggle it on and off, start, stop, start, stop. And yeah, I think one of the last things really I just want to show is MQTT. I do have MQTT server running, and I don't know what you're going to use this for really, but I mean, if you wanted to push certain MQTT actions or data or trigger something through MQTT, this is really what you would use. So this was also a connector. I've just used the word MQ, it's just plain text over there. But the important part is this part here. So if I do a button press, it's going to publish a message to the MQTT broker. And this is what it's going to basically send. It's going to send the time. It's just a variable, a built-in variable for the time right now to show you that it is now. And the words from button, just to sort of show you what it does. And I can actually demo this to you if I start up MQTT. Oops. I've got an MQTT Explorer that I was using when I was troubleshooting my MQTT for my son of switches and all that sort of thing. But just to show you then that it does work, there's my MQTT, and I think it is this one that I'm running because there's my internal address actually. There we go. So you can see a couple of topics and things like HomeAssistant and Venus Home. That's my Victron solar system and everything. I don't know where it's going to appear on here, but you should see it. Just watch over here. This is sniffing the whole time what's coming through. You can see it blinking every now and again as data updates and so on. I'm going to press the MQTT button and let's just see where it appears. There we go. See right here it came up. Companion equals 223504 from button. So just to show you that it does actually appear live inside a MQTT server as well. Disconnect. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's basically it. The emulator, you'll see it opens up in a browser window. So you could also put this in on your tablet or whatever the case as well. But the emulator is different from the other thing I'm going to show you now. If the emulator shows you the one physical page and you can interact on it. So if you click this, you'll see it changes on the Stream Deck at the same time. Okay, that is the emulator. And if you were to put this in, like I said, you could do this on your tablet or your phone or whatever the case. That's the one view, and this might maybe the one that you actually want to use is the emulator view. If I go back here, you'll see there's also web buttons. The web buttons is the one with the 8000/tablet address, and it's slightly different. This is a continuous long, all your different buttons just on one big long screen. Not very, very easy to navigate. And the other thing is it is updating. It's showing you what you want to see, but it doesn't always do. Like if I click here, you'll see it's not changing. Some things might, I think if it's a button with an action, like that one, it will work. But like page changes doesn't work. So just for a matter of interest, I don't want to go into a lot of detail on it, but just to show you that's what those things do, the emulator and the web buttons. And those are the the URL addresses you could put in here to access them. If they're not working, then you'd have to probably go look here under the settings to see what you've got to configure or activate there. And then, yeah, they've got a pretty good, if you click there on getting started, they've got very good documentation actually on, there's a mass of stuff I didn't go into here around module variables, custom variables. You know, there's a stack of stuff here that you can explore. And I mean, I have spent the last month looking through all this and getting things to work and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it did take me a little while. Very, very satisfying. I'm very, very happy with everything that is working at the moment. But it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve. If you want to have something quick and easy, then, you know, go for StreamController. Probably it's going to do most of what you want to do anyway. Yeah, and that's where you report bugs and features. They've got a Facebook group and a Slack chat and so on for help as well. And of course, donate money. I think they have got a sort of a paid service as well, if I remember correctly. But they do otherwise also work on donations. And most of those connectors, I think, are free as well. But yes, that's pretty well much then really what I want to show with Bitfocus Companion, I think. I've got so excited, as I said, I have really automated so many things now around the house. I'm using it as a sort of a dashboard for alerting. I can go to my Home Assistant and get a nice quick overview of all the things I want to keep an eye on. And I've used color coding quickly to show me if things are red status or green status. I mean, you could make them orange, you could make them whatever you want to. I've also got a couple of things like reboot my router, router restart, the wireless stuff. You know, these router lights on and off. These are all things you can set up any way you want to, really. There's just endless amounts of stuff you can do with this. And then, of course, yes, I run my updates every day. And when I want quick buttons to get to my notes, I can just press that. So, yeah, it's made my life very different, quite honestly, in terms of just having information at hand, being able to automate things, get things to work in my spreadsheets quickly. Hence why I bought a bigger Stream Deck. I was planning to sell the smaller one. I don't even know if I want to sell it anymore because I can actually operate both of them independently and have them do different things. You know, the one could become a permanent dashboard display for my Home Assistant and the other one can do other things. So who knows? I might even get more. But I've just found this terribly, terribly exciting, and I've really been enjoying setting everything up. I've still been alternating a bit back and forth with StreamController. Like I said, you really need to go look and see which one's going to do the job best for you. And yeah, that really is it. Thanks for sticking through this video all the way to this point if you have. And I hope for those of you that are looking for some more technical info around syntax for some of the buttons and everything, some of the inserts that I put in are going to help you just figure out some of that stuff a lot quicker than I did. So yeah, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video.